العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. So Alhamdulillah, we've reached now to Halaqah 18, and we have in the last Halaqah, so we talked about the very beginning of the Dawah of Rasul والسلام, in year 1 up to year 3. And during that period, Nabi Sallallahu was inviting secretly, not openly. So, his close relatives, his wife, and his household, and a few others accepted Islam at that period. Now, in the 3rd year, we come to a new chapter. And so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the 3rd year now orders Nabi Sallallahu to open up the da'wah, to openly call everyone towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is mentioned in a few places of the Quran. First of all, in Surah Al-Hijr, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فاصدع بما تؤمر وأعرض عن المشركين إنك كفيناك المستهزئين الذين يجعلون مع الله إلها آخر فسوف يعلمون ولقد نعلم أنك يضيق صدرك بما يقولون فسبح بحمد ربك وكن من الساجدين واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين. So not only I wanted to relate, the early verses which enjoin upon Rasulullah sallallahu the open call to Islam, but also the style of the Meccan surahs, which is prolific in these. Probably if you remember, we might have mentioned that earlier on when we talked about the very beginning of the revelation and the characteristics of the Meccan surahs, the very concise and very powerful and poignant, verses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Fasda." So it basically means, open up and now give it your all. Expound openly what thou art commanded. The use of Ali's translations or the classical English. People, they don't like that anymore, but I think it sounds nicer than that dry, at least it had more kind of spiritual feel to it, right? At least that's my take on it. We'll go on. So therefore, expound openly what thou art commanded, what you are. And turn away from those who join false gods with Allah. So now look at the English, how long it is. Therefore, expound openly what thou art commanded. Now look at the Arabic. Fasda' bima tu'mar. Right? There's no way you can capture that, in English or any language. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fasda' bima tu'mar. So openly, just do with your all, and just go for it, totally. For what you have been ordered, what you have been ordered, and what you have been ordered is to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And turn away from the mushrikeen. Don't bother about them. They're not going to accept this. They're going to give you a lot of static. There's going to be a conflict ongoing. Don't be concerned with that. Be concerned, with what you're ordered to do, and just focus on that. Don't worry about, who or what, or, who likes what. Just carry on with your mission. إِنَّكَ فَيْنَكَ الْمُسْتَهْزِئِينَ. We will suffice you against all those who are mustahzi'in, who scoff at you, make fun of you. And that was originally what they started off with, making fun of him and mocking him. And then it gets more serious, and ultimately, it gets dead serious, and they actually plot to kill Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Those who join with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala another God, another deity. سوف يعلم, soon they will know. وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ يَضِيقُ صَدْرُكَ بِمَا يَقُولُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, as a kind of consolation to us. We know how you're feeling, the pressure and your concern and your worry for the people, and since they're not accepting your message, and it was your concern for them in the first place, which was the beginning of revelation, that you were concerned for them, and then ultimately revelation came, and now you actually have the tools to invite them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. and they're not responding. So naturally, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was, very affected by this, being, the Ra'ufur Rahim, the very merciful, and beneficial person that he was. We know that you're facing, you're distressed with what they're saying to you. So what's the prescription? What's the remedy? So turn your way away from the creation and turn yourself to the Creator, and call Him by His wonderful names, and with His tasbih and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and be among the people who prostrate. Engross yourself in salat. And be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's slave and His servant, and exercise His servitude and His slavery until certainty reaches you. What is the certainty? There's only one certainty in life, and that's death. Everything else is uncertain. One certainty. And so for all the uncertainty, we're making all preparations. For the one thing that's certain, we're in total disregard. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obviously given this instruction to His Rasul, and obviously whatever instruction is given to Rasul, generally it is for us as well, not more so. So this is a kind of feeling. So what's the injunction here? What is the call to order here, or the call to action? Okay, openly now, focus on and undertake, full power and full focus and full concentration, full effort, which you've been ordered out. So now comes a new chapter, the opening, da'wat openly to the people. And now the whole scenario is going to change drastically. Also, وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ وَاخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ فَإِنْ عَصَوْكَ فَقُلْ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى الْعَزِيزِ الرَّحِيمِ الَّذِي يَرَاكَ حِينَ تَقُومُ الساجدين إنه هو السميع العليم. Allahu Akbar. And admonish the nearest of kinsmen. وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ. Warn your close relations. And this is also the feature of Islam, that your relations, even though they may not be Muslim, you put your first attention on your relations, your kinsmen. And in this case, obviously none of them are Muslims, so invite them to Islam. And lower thy wing to the believers who follow thee. All the people who are not yet aware of your mission, invite them to your mission. Those people who have joined your mission, sort of beautiful, analogy. Just as the mother bird, covers her young with their wings and keeps them close to her. So similarly, you bring those people who have now committed to following you, bring them close to you and look after them under your wing of rahmah, concern. Okay, and if they turn back, if they disobey you, then tell them, I'm free from what you do. Your polytheism, your evil actions, and free from that. And put your faith, put your trust on the Aziz, Ar-Rahim, the most powerful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most merciful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alladhi yaraka hina taqum, the one who sees you when you stand for salat or for whatever. And your movements among those people who are engaged in sajda. In other words, He sees you individually, and He sees you engaged with those people who are with you. And then, innahu as-sami'ul alim, and He is the one who sees and He hears all and is aware of all. So this is the وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. So warn your near kinsmen. So this is the main thing that we're going to focus on. How did Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam respond to that practically? Okay, so also, before we get into that, just to sort of a mention of some of those early surahs, and for a little homework that everybody can do, is as we were mentioning, these early Meccan surahs, what do they deal with? They deal with, number one, Tawheed, this oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the main focus, the hereafter, the life hereafter, paradise, Jahannam, and some of the stories of the former people and what happened to them, etc. So you'll find this in all of these various surahs. So you can make a note of that and look at that and see the distinguishing features of those Meccan surahs. So now, as people start accepting Islam, the basic, basically his own relatives, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu anhu, some of his aunts, some of his cousins, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, and others. So the first skirmish in Islam actually didn't take place in Medina, actually took place in Makkah. So the first skirmish was what? Actually, Sa'd ibn Waqqas with other Muslims, and their habit was, because everything was going on secretly initially for the first few years. So what they used to do, they used to go outside of Mecca and go into the ravines or valleys or, isolated, desolate places, and they would pray, And so it so happened that Sa'd ibn Waqqas and some other Muslims were in one of these desolate areas, and they were praying when some mushriks, some polytheists who happened to be, traveling by that particular area, and they saw them, and so they start taunting them and start, giving them a hard time, and ultimately it ends up in a conflict. They start fighting, and Sayyidina Sa'd radiallahu anhu, he picks up the jawbone of a camel and smacks one of these guys on his head and cuts his head open, and obviously this is now serious. However, Quran comes and continuously through the Meccan period instructs, moreover, orders the Muslims, kuffu aydiyakum, hold your hands. This is not the time for retaliation. This is the time to exercise forbearance, patience, sabr. And Nabi is reminded again and again, فَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا يَقُولُونَ فَاصْبِرْ كَرَمًا. And remain patient, adopt forbearance. Inshallah, your day will come. Everything is being under the eye of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's observing everything, and they will pay for their actions. This is not the time now. The time of Makkah is the time of forbearance, patience. Keep your hands to yourself. Don't retaliate. Not much less initiate, but don't even retaliate, in defense. Just hold your hands. Okay. So now, Allahu Akbar. So now, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what's the strategy to announce this to the public? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a very famous mawqif, and it's mentioned all the hadith. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu قال استعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الصفا ذات يوم فقال يا صباحا اجتمعت إليه قريش قالوا ما لك؟ قال أرأيتم لو أخبرتم some of this is not there now. Actually أخبرتم يعني بجيش يعني يصيبكم من وراء صفحة هذا الجبل. So basically Nabi Sallallahu climbs the mountain. Actually, it's not a mountain, it was a small mount, the Safa wal Marwa, where we do our, the sa'i. So where Hajar al-Islam used to actually go between them. There used to be two small mounts, two small sort of mounts which no longer exist. Those have been taken away, now palaces and big buildings have been put there. But in any case, and if you remember, that's the same Jabal, just in front of Jabal Abi Qubais, where Ibrahim alayhi salam stood and called the people for Hajj. So Safa is a small mount just before the larger mount of Jabal Abi Qubais, both of which are actually no longer there. In any case, so he got on top of that mountain and he called all Quraysh. And this is a very short riwayat. And in another riwayat, he actually calls all the various tribes of Quraysh. Ya Bani Fihr, Ya Bani Fulan, Ya Bani Fulan. And then he even calls, his relatives, Ya Safiya, Ya Safiyat Ammati Rasulullah, Ya Fatima Binti Rasulullah, etc., etc. So he calls all of these people. And since, as you remember, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was that Sadiq al-Amin, who everybody used to love and respect and honor, and he was the one whose word was always accepted as true, and he would never tell a lie to anyone. He was known for that quality. So now he's calling, and bringing all and calling all of these people. So everybody gathers. What's going on? Yeah, Sabaha. Sabaha is, the call, sort of a call to alert, to like a red flag, or, if you will. So, Ya Sabaha, who? It's a morning, and usually when an enemy invades, so the habit of the Arabs was They would invade early in the morning. So it's like, there's an enemy coming. So what would he say if I told you that there's an enemy behind this mountain and he's standing on Jabal Abi Qubais and there in the valley? Suppose I tell you now there's an army coming from the other side of this mountain. Will you believe me? He said, absolutely. We never disbelieved you in any previous juncture. You've always told us the truth. Definitely, why not? Okay. So he said, that being the case, if you would believe me, if I would, warn you of an enemy, I've got something to warn you of that's even more serious. I am here to warn you of a punishment. It's just in front of you. It's just waiting for there. If you don't, accept my message, And so basically, so accept this message of Tawheed, accept this message of Islam, and at this juncture, his uncle Abu Lahab, who also was the brother of Abu Talib, but Abu Talib, was always, and other uncles of Rasulullah, even though they didn't accept him initially, but they didn't oppose him also. Abu Lahab was day one, and he has many, events and instances where he just, takes just a ferocious and horrific stance against his own nephew, Rasulullah. So he says, Abu Lahab say, you gathered us all for this, to tell us this? Tabban laka ya. Tabban laka sa'ir al-yawm, he says to him. You'd be destroyed the entire day. In other words, he's cursing him. And so, cursing Rasulullah would bring the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that came down upon him was the whole surah, which is read from then up until forever. And it's read, for example, every Muslim reads this. And so every time we read this, it's a curse upon this individual. So what type of recompense? La ilaha illallah. Tabbat yada abi lahab wa tab. So the surah, Abu Lahab, it's also called Surah Al-Masad. And so that surah came down as a retribution and a curse to Abu Lahab, who had the audacity to curse Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that was a general invitation also. Another instance, and whether this took place or this one took place first, it's not really clear. But in any case, both of these have been mentioned in the books of Sirah. And this is a very interesting event. Again, this last riwayat, of course, it's narrated in the very standard books of Hadith. This is not narrated in such compilations, but it's also narrated in books of Sirah, wallahu a'lam. And it basically is this, that when Rasulullah now is ordered that he has to now open up the invitation and call particularly his own family members. So how to do that? So what would be a very diplomatic, and a very sort of effective strategy to, announce, this announcement, which is going to change everybody's life drastically. This is a huge thing, calling people away from worshiping their idols and leaving their belief set and adapting a whole new belief set. This is the hardest thing there is to do, to change people's belief sets. So Rasulullah understand that this is going to be an extremely, delicate challenge. So for this, he came up with a strategy that will invite them to a dinner. I'll invite all my close relatives to a dinner, sort of informal, a good, nice dinner and food, and then after that, I will proceed to invite them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he called Ali radiallahu ta'ala, and if this riwayat is sahih, wallahu alam, and this is how it's mentioned in the books of Sirah. So he gave it, Sayyidina Ali, he told Ali radiallahu that this is, the mission that I've been, entrusted with. So he gave 1 cup of milk and 1 leg of mutton. Now he's going to call all of his relatives, his uncles, his cousins, and about 40, 50 people. And you've got 1 leg of lamb and you've got 1 cup of milk. So what? And so he says, say the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when the people come, Nabi as is mentioned in the riwayat of Allah, he took 1, bite from that meat, and then he just called the people, and they came, one small group after another, and they would eat, and they would eat, and eat, and eat, and eat, and eat, and eat. 40 people kept eating and drinking as well. And the cup would be given to someone, and they would drink, and to the next, and drink, and drink, and drink, and drink. and it remained just as it was in the beginning. Right? And so now, if this riwayat, has, a degree of credibility, so in any case, what probably took place, at least that's pretty certain that this dawah took place. Now, whether this miraculous thing happened, and this is not strange because this happened in many instances. Something very similar happened like this in many instances, but this would be the first happening that is chronicled. Many times Nabi Sallallahu would, make dua for barakat, and a very small amount would feed a multitude, hundreds. So in any case, so again, Abu Lahab is there, at this, at this dawah, at this invitation, and now his 40 uncles and cousins and everybody's coming. Also, those people who already had accepted Islam were also in the gathering, obviously. Sayyidina Ali, Jafar, his aunts and others. So what does Abu Lahab say? Now, actually, I'll read from this. This is a translation that one author has rendered. And so we'll just read this also. So it's related that Abu Lahab, he said something like this. He said to Rasulullah, he said, "These are your uncles and cousins. You may speak to them, but you have to leave off apostasy." In other words, okay, you can talk to your own relations, but you're going to have to leave this, idea of calling us away from the religion of our ancestors and our forefathers. Do not turn away from the faith of your people and do not expose them to the anger of the Arabs. Your people cannot face up to the opposition of the whole of the Arab nation, and they cannot be expected to face them all in war. You people are aware of what you intend to invent in their faith. They have not been heedless of what you are doing and what you advocate. Rebellion against religion and against the traditions inherited from our forefathers. Take care then of yourself and your father's offspring. Your father's offspring meaning Abdul Muttalib, his grandfather and his great-grandfather Hashim. In other words, Bani Hashim, Bani Abdul Muttalib, all of your relatives, right? Because be certain, basically he's saying, be certain that if you're going to invite to this, you're challenging, as we said earlier, you're going to be challenging the belief sets of the entire Arab nation. All the tribes are now involved in this idolatry. And you're going to, stand up and turn everybody away from that. It's going to be a disaster. So, forget it, in other words. Don't even proceed any farther. Go back, and it would be a terrible disaster for you and for our Qabila. And so Abu Lahab was from the very beginning. Not only him, and his wife Jamil was even worse than her husband. She would throw things in the path of Rasulullah sallallahu. She would throw dust in his way and on him, and she used to, sing songs of hajjah, against Rasulullah sallallahu, and rather than, taking a stand like Abu Talib, at least defending the honor, which was the Arab custom, and protecting their own kinsmen, they went totally against. And as a result, not only tabbat yada Abi Lahab, also wamra'atuhu hammalat al-hatab. His wife is also cursed in the surah as well. So anyway, and then ultimately he said, okay, and as for this, what we're seeing here with this is all some kind of magic, and he's cast a spell on us, and everybody just disperse. So Rasulullah even didn't get a chance to present his message. So Abu Lahab strategically, sort of blocked the whole intervention. But Nabi Sallallahu wasn't deterred, so the next day he did the same thing. So he made another doubt. This time he was going to be careful that he would be the first one to speak, right? So then, after that, Nabi Sallallahu called them again, and he said something like this to them. He said, "Praise to Allah, yani alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh," the standard khutbah that he used to offer, again and again. Praise be to Allah, I praise Him and seek His support, believe in Him and rely upon Him, and I bear witness that there is no deity save Allah, and only Allah who has no partners. A forerunner does not tell lies to his own people, and if I were to lie to all mankind, I would not tell you one. By Allah, who is the only deity, I am Allah's messenger to you particularly, and to mankind in general. He has commanded me to call you to the belief in him, saying, warn your immediate kinsfolk. So I am calling on you to say two words which are easily pronounced, but weighty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's scale, to bear witness that there is no deity save Allah and that I am his messenger. And by Allah, you will die as you sleep, and you will be resurrected as you wake, and you will be held to account for what you do, and you will be rewarded well for your good actions and suffer retribution for your bad ones. It will be either heaven forever or hell forever. O children of Abdul Muttalib, by Allah, I know no one who has brought his people anything better than I am bringing you. I am offering you the happiness of this world and the life to come, who will accept my call and support me in furthering it. And so now he puts it right on the cards right on the table, as what it said. And now everyone's quiet. Nobody mentions anything. And it's mentioned, Allahu Alam, that Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, he was a young boy, perhaps something like, Khalid. And so Ali radiallahu anhu, he stood up and said, I'm with you, Ya Rasul. I'm there. So Nabi said, this is the man that's with me. And so, Abu Lahab and others start laughing. Your own uncle isn't even with you, and you have this little kid with you, And so they just made a mockery of the whole exercise. And so he was not to be deterred, and he would be carrying on with his message, and we'll see how this unfolds in the ensuing halaqats, inshallah. And as we mentioned earlier on, we mentioned the Islam earlier on, that his aunt Safiya had accepted Islam by this time, and also her son Zubair. Al-Fadl, if you remember, the wife of Abbas, who was also, Abbas didn't accept Islam at that point, but he wasn't opposing. So even Hamza, they might have been skeptical, or they might have been, they couldn't understand what he was talking about. But in any case, they didn't oppose. It was only actually Abu Lahab, whose actual name was actually Abdul Uzza. It's interesting because his name even was, kind of a bad omen, if you would. Abdul Uzza, the slave of Uzza. And so he was the only one that really took, the strong stance among his actual uncles. And so al-Fadl, the wife of Abbas, and if you remember, they had adopted Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu anhu, and Sayyidina Ja'far had accepted Islam very early on also. And also al-Fadl, was influenced her three sisters. Asma, who ultimately became the wife of Ja'far, and then Salma, who was the wife of Hamza. So, there was a very close circle. And then, of course, Ja'far, as we mentioned, been adopted by Abbas. And then, of course, we mentioned Ayman, who was, the slave woman who was inherited by Rasulullah and set free by him. And then ultimately Zayd, as we heard the story of Zayd, and they ultimately married. From that marriage, as we said also, that was Sayyidina Usama radiallahu anhu majma'in. So this was the small nucleus, and they're expanding, but with a lot of friction and a lot of opposition. And inshallah, in our next talaga, we'll hear more about that opposition and as it intensifies, and then what were the measures that took place as that opposition and that deterrence intensified. So, any questions? Anything needs clarity?
Those ayahs that you mentioned in the very beginning, when exactly were they revealed?
That was, they mentioned in the third year. So those were particularly وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ فَاسْتَعْ بِمَا تُؤْمَرُ. So they say that this is, these were the injunctions at that point when these ayahs and these verses were revealed. Now, actually, it was the order to, to open up the da'wah. And as we see that it was during the third year that these incidents took place. Also, Surah Mudaththir was also one of the early surahs that was mentioned, and that also has Qum fa'anzir, ya ayyuhal mudaththir, Qum, stand up and start warning. So these were the early ayahs that we mentioned that came down around that time, in the third year. So we're talking about the third year of the after the revelation, beginning of Revelation. Okay, anything else? Any online stuff? Nothing? Okay, so inshallah, we'll be looking forward for our next halaqah and having you all on board. We want to thank everyone for came physically, who came virtually. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to take the lessons that are to be learned, from these lessons and give us tawfiq to follow in the footsteps of Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, ظاهرا وباطنا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك ونتوب اليك والسلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.